The following is a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.
Crossed Flags, a racing podcast. It's your midweek fix for racing news and information. Brought to you by the Championship Racing Network. Now let's head trackside to join your hosts, Steve West and Matt Nicholson.
Welcome into episode number 34, Crossed Flags. I'm Steve West, Matt Nicholson here. Woof, we got a list to deal with here because we got good news, we got sad news, we got bad news, then we got one of the weirdest crashes I've seen in a long time. All that coming up. But first things first, we got the good news here. Earlier this year, we were talking about John Force and how he got into a situation, real bad situation at Richmond where his engine exploded. And if you're familiar with how dragsters work, the engine's sitting right where it was, and it just caused him to lose control of the car. We went into pretty good detail about that. Go back and look at one of the older Cross Flag episodes. You'll be able to find out about that one if you're looking for details on it. He is back. He actually was back at Las Vegas last weekend, a week and a half ago now, as we look at it. He wasn't driving, but he was there on the track, at the track, supporting his people. And they did a nice job. Brittany Force won the Top Fuel, and his funny car driver, Austin Prock, won the funny car event that time around.
Yep.
And to add to the good news, he should be able to be there this weekend as the NHRA does their season finale at what is now called In-N-Out Burger Dragway. Wonder if there's a sponsorship involved in that. But either way, he should be able to be there because it's real close to his house and doesn't have to worry about traveling all that much. And he's guaranteed a title in the funny car division. It's either going to be that young kid, Austin Prock, or it's going to be the guy who's filling in for John Force in his funny car ride, and that's Fast Jack Beckman. They're the only two that are mathematically eligible for that title. So despite what happened earlier this year, he will end this year as a title-winning owner.
Prock's going to be hard to beat. I'll call my shot.
Oh, yeah, he will be. If you look at the numbers, you get a max points of 160. For Fast Jack Beckman to be able to claim that in John Force's name, Austin Prock would have to basically not qualify. And I don't see that happen.
No, that's not going to happen.
Sorry. But the story's still there. Very cool story. Glad to see John Force is back up and rolling and getting around and being able to travel and go to these tracks. It's fantastic news. That's the important part. When will he get back to getting behind the wheel? I don't know. Could it be next year? Maybe, but I think he knows he's got a long road to go, and he's in his 70s now, so that makes it even that much more difficult to be able to overcome injuries and specifically a traumatic brain injury like he suffered back at Richmond earlier this year. Mm-hmm. But yes, our thoughts and our prayers continue for him, and we love the fact that he's back at the track, at least when it comes to being able to witness things that are going on. That's the good news. We constantly have gone over the fact that you'll see special paint schemes in different series. And in Formula One, being only 10 teams, Formula One tends to have 10 different reveal dates. And we've detailed that, especially on the big show. We don't really talk about it much here on Cross Flags. We may start with this podcast and, kind of give you another look at them real quick as they start to come out. But we're going to be able to do it next year all at one time.
They're going to do a 75th anniversary reveal for all 10 teams next February, and they're doing it at the O2 in London.
And remember, 7 of the 10 Formula One teams have their race operations based in Britain. So it makes sense that they would choose to go to London and do that.
It does.
That's very unusual. I mean, we've seen everything from effectively the 1st of February all the way to the end of February before all 10 teams reveal their new looks for the new year. For them to all do it all at the same time, it's actually not a bad move on part of Formula One. No. And I guarantee you it was F1's idea. It wasn't the team's idea.
Right.
They don't work that well together. Sorry, just doesn't happen. So that's 2 pieces of good news. Then we got the weird news. If you were watching the race on Sunday afternoon, the season finale at Phoenix, Matt and I saw something that, well, truth be told, we've never seen before.
Along with millions of other people.
That right there. This is the field. They're coming to a restart. That right there is not a race car. That's the pace car. You know, the car that's supposed to make sure that everyone stays at a certain speed going around the track when the caution is out. That's the pace car. So how, Matt, I'll let you take on this, did he end up
not sure if I
getting
want to.
spun around and hitting the sand barrels?
That it wasn't getting, matter of getting spun around. It was a matter of incompetence and not getting on the pit road when you freaking need to. That is ridiculous. That is, I can't even say what I want to say about that because it's past ridiculous that a pace car misjudges. Well, first off, that's a problem at Phoenix alone when you've got the start-finish line on the other side of the racetrack, but the entrance to pit road is on the completely opposite side of the racetrack. And the sad part about this is the pace car driver had did this multiple times before he had this epic goof.
Yeah, it's
That
not like
is-
he wasn't unfamiliar with how to get the pace car off of the
That's-
track and onto pit road.
That is mind-blowing and baffling to me that you have did this multiple times at the same racetrack, but you hit the sand barrels and knock the sand barrels into pit road, and they have to stop the race
Yep.
to reset them.
Yep. Got to clean all that sand up. Got to refill the sand barrels because that's a safety feature right there. Because if you notice,
pathetic.
that's pit wall. All it is what? 2 feet wide at the most?
Maximum 3. Maximum.
And if a car just hits that straight on, toast. So they have to put the sand barrels there in order to kind of cushion the impact. Of course, sand barrels are not exactly what one would call the softest thing on the world, so it created damage to the passenger side of the Toyota Camry pace car that they were using. And what did they do? They went to the backup pace car. Thank God at least they had one.
Yeah. The second pace car that pulls the second part of the field during the pace laps.
Exactly. So they went to that
Jeez.
one. That probably is the weirdest news of the weekend.
That is weirder than when the pace car caught on fire at Texas that year.
I would agree. Yeah, we
That's-
could explain what happened on that one. That was a situation of rubber buildup and heat, if I remember correctly.
No,
Or was there an
that
electrical
that was a light malfunction. That
light
caused
malfunction?
fire.
Thank you. I forgot exactly what it was.
That's inexcusable.
Yeah.
But we don't have an officiating problem.
Yeah. State of this sport address.
We don't have an officiating problem.
Right.
Sure.
Somebody needed to remind the pace car driver, get the heck off the track earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this. We have a champion. Actually, we got 3. Friday Night Truck Series, Saturday Xfinity Series, and then the Cup Series on Sunday. Sunday's Cup Series race was won, and therefore the championship was won by that guy, Joey Logano. 3-time champion. He's now one of a fairly select group of people who have 10 Cup Series, or one of 10 people that have 3 Cup Series titles or more. I mean, obviously, you got the 7 for Richard Petty and Dale Earnhardt, and of course, Jimmy Johnson. You got the 4 for Jeff Gordon, and then you got 6 drivers, Joey Logano just adding his name to it, that have 3. And there's a pretty impressive lineup of names there, not the least of which are Lee Petty and Darrell Waltrip and Cale Yarborough and Tony Stewart. And now Joey Logano. But Joey Logano is one of those guys that seems to be controversial. He's one of those guys that you either love him or you hate him, it seems like. Those people that love him really love the 22 and the shell and the Pennzoil and the yellow and the red and the whole look. Those that hate him, shoo, man, they're vocal.
Yep.
And now, remember, we're in this playoff format. We've been in it now for a decade. But now all of a sudden, I'm hearing a whole lot of people saying we need to change this. Why do we need to change this, they're saying? because they feel like he is an unworthy champion. Why? Well, he did get into the final 8 on a disqualification from Alex Bowman. So I guess that they're saying that that's part of it. But here's the deal. Disqualifications are part of racing. Ask our resident driver.
They are. But when you've got an average finish that is the lowest in the history of the chase and playoffs combined, that's a problem with me.
Either way, the idea behind playoffs, and this could be football, hockey, baseball, basketball, soccer, Cup Series. The idea is to be hot at the right time. What did I say when Alex Bowman was disqualified and Joey Logano was put in the final 8?
That's about to be trouble.
I said, watch out. Because now that he's in, look at what's going to happen. He won the first race of that final 3, that round of 8, guaranteeing he was going to go into the title race. That gave the 22 crew the chance to go for 2 weeks solid without even having to worry about his performance on the track. All they had to do was make sure that they built a car that was going to work at Phoenix. Boom.
That's it.
I said it before, I'll say it again. You get hot at the right time, you got it nailed. Joey Logano nailed it. Do you have to like it? No. But the criticism of it, you want to change it just because of that? Here's the thing. You'll end up changing this every year if you change the Cup format because of this. Because you'll find another reason not to like the new format, and then you'll hate the next set of rules. Sooner or later, you're going to have to settle in on a set of rules, as imperfect as they may be. Sooner or later, you're going to have to settle in on some set of rules that says, okay, this is how we're going to do it. What do you want changed? How do you want to see it changed? Do you want to go back to the old way where you have the potential of, yeah, maybe it could come down to the final race of the year? Or do you want to have the fact that the final race of the year might not mean a darn thing in the grand scheme of things because the championship winning driver actually mathematically clinched the title with 4 races to go? Because that's happened in the past too. What's the better system? People sit there and say, I like the racing back in the 1970s much better than I like it today. Did you really? Did you like it so much better when drivers were winning by, a 5-lap advantage over second place?
It's so hard to say because people's going to find something to gripe and moan about regardless.
Yeah. So complain about it as you will. I doubt seriously they'll change it much. And whether you like it or not, Joey Logano is your 2024 Cup Series champion, and he's got 3 of them now. After the race, a couple of things came to an end. One of them very, very notable because it was a very long streak. In fact, the longest in Cup Series history. Kyle Busch's streak of winning at least one race a year came to an end at 19 straight years. That broke the tie, by the way, that he held after the 2023 season when he did claim that 19th with no less than the king, Richard Petty. Is it a Richard Childress Racing problem? Is it a Kyle Busch problem? Is it a combination of things?
It's an RCR problem. I'm sorry, point blank, it's an RCR problem.
You and I have said this right off the bat. Multiple teams, multiple car operations are important nowadays because you can get information and share them between the 2 cars.
You can.
I'm not seeing a whole lot of information being able to come out of that 3 crew that's going to help that 8 car.
No. Or the 16 or the 31, unless you're on a road course.
That's true. And they're kind of, they may not be quote unquote teammates as far as being under the RCR banner, but let's face it, Cowlick Racing, they work very, very closely with the folks over at RCR.
Mm-hmm.
So is it Kyle Busch's driving style? Or is it just the fact that whatever they're learning on the 3, 16, and 31 is not helping?
It's going to be the latter because it's not Kyle Busch's driving style. He was in position plenty of times this year to win races. And I better not, or I will lose my absolute you-know-what if somebody goes back and says, oh, he should have won Daytona, but 62 didn't push him. No, don't give me that. Do not give me that under no circumstances whatsoever.
You and I dealt with that at the time anyway.
This is, I'm not even going to go to that molehill. Even when he come out and said, why are we blaming him?
Mm-mm. If the driver who misses out on the win is not willing to blame the driver who, quote unquote, should have pushed him, no blame belongs on the 62 at all.
When you solidly win 3 races last year and you can't even be close to sniffing this year, and not all that much has radically changed with the car. Well, hardly nothing's changed with the car.
True.
And you can't keep up. That's not a driver problem. That's a team problem.
Kyle Busch is one of those guys, just like the last guy we got done talking about, Joey Logano. You like Joey Logano, you hate Joey Logano. You like Kyle Busch, you hate Kyle Busch. There's really no middle. There's no just, I'm okay with him. It seems like anyway. You either have a passionate view upon Kyle Busch, either way. And some of you are celebrating the fact that finally came to an end. Others of you are very, very depressed. I'm going to look at it from one particular point of view. Sooner or later, all good things come to an end. Is it sad that it did in this case? Yes, because Kyle Busch is an extremely talented driver. Kyle Busch will end up in the Hall of Fame. Of that, I have no doubt. He's got 2 championships, and amongst the top 3 series of NASCAR, he's got more than 200 wins. He is going to end up in the NASCAR Hall of Fame, like it or not. Doesn't matter. I'm just stating a fact. As will Joey Logano. 3 titles and closing in on 40 victories. That'll do it, because you got a lot of drivers who are in the Hall or going into the Hall who have a heck of a lot less when it comes to titles and wins on their resume.
Way less.
So those 2 drivers will end up in the Hall of Fame one day. I tend to agree with him. What we saw at the beginning of last year when he won 3 races in fairly rapid-fire succession now appears to be more the anomaly than the return of Richard Childress Racing. And that was what Richard Childress Racing was hoping for. They brought this guy in to spark the rebirth of that team. But the problem is that team has a major anchor. It ain't him. It's Austin Dillon. And I think Austin Dillon might actually be realizing this as well, because we keep hearing little bitty things that Austin Dillon might be considering what he's going to do for his future. His future is not behind the wheel. Well, nobody's future is behind the wheel. Not long term. Every driver is sooner or later going to have to get out of the car. But Austin Dillon might be thinking about it a little bit sooner. And truth be told, I think it'd only benefit the team, because I look at what they've got down to the Xfinity Series, and I'm looking at the guy that they've nicknamed Big Country, Austin Hill, and I think trading one Austin for another might actually be a major benefit for the Richard Childress Racing organization.
I would even go as far as to saying trading Jesse Love for him.
I would like to see a little more seasoning out of Jesse, but yeah, I would think, to me, Jesse's got more talent than Austin Dillon does too.
At this point, I would go that far.
Sure. I think Jesse's got more talent than Austin Dillon does as well. But I have no problem with that. The future, if they can keep this guy around for another, 3 years, which I think you would be more than willing to do, I think the future does look really good at Richard Childress Racing. But it cannot involve Austin Dillon unless he's upstairs in the front office.
I would have to agree with that, because he's outside of a few super speedway races, he's been nothing but a boat anchor for the entire team. Because when you look at when you look at when Ryan Newman was in the 31, 31 was fairly consistent. It was within an eyelash of winning the title that year. I think it was 2014 when he finished behind Harvick. But majority of the wins that Dylan has, he had to do something to where he was a hero, looked like a hero. Daytona, Richmond, Coca-Cola 600 when he just by a stroke of luck when Jimmy Johnson ran out of fuel, and he was just right there at the right place at the right time. He ran out of fuel coming off of 2. Oh, I got that one. No, you was gifted that one because Johnson was in Southern Virginia when you were in Northern South Carolina. He was that far ahead of you. But I can recall one race that he legitimately won heads up, and that was Texas that year. That's it.
It's not the best of records.
No.
Not the best of records. And then there's the end of the streak, and then there's the end of the team. This team. That team. My team, so to speak. I've made no bones about this on the big show, and, well, I haven't been awfully shy about it on this show either, on this podcast. I have been a Tony Stewart fan since 1999, when he debuted as a rookie in the Cup Series for Joe Gibbs Racing and won at Richmond, which has been, for the longest time, one of my favorite tracks to watch, whether in person or on television. And I knew at that time that Darrell Waltrip, who was my driver, was set to retire after the 2000 season. So I'm like, wow, I got to find a new driver. I'd had the lucky chance when I was living in Virginia to meet Joe Gibbs right after he won the third of his 3 titles with the Washington Redskins. Remember them? Ask your parents, kids. Really, really nice guy, ultimately nice guy. And when I found Tony Stewart drove for Joe Gibbs, I was like, okay, I can deal with that combination. And I followed Tony Stewart the whole way, even when he joined Gene Haas and formed this crew in the 2009 to debut in the 2009 season. Before that, Gene Haas had Haas CNC Racing, which he started up in about 2002. They didn't really have a whole heck of a lot of success. Couple of top 10s here and there. Only one win came with the courtesy of Jason Leffler in what we now call the Xfinity Series. That was it. Tony Stewart comes in, resets the entire organization, puts them on a winning move. How quick? First year, both Tony and Ryan Newman claim wins fairly fast. The first one was actually an all-star race. But hey, that's a pretty high-profile race for this fledgling team. They go on, they claim 2 titles, one with Tony Stewart, one with Kevin Harvick. They claim 100-plus wins, the final one coming at the courtesy of Riley Erbst just last Saturday night at the Xfinity Series title race, where he was able to beat out the champion, Justin Allgaier, to the finish line to claim that win. Tony Stewart and Gene Haas were both in attendance there. They were both in attendance for Sunday's race, even though none of the 4 Cup Series cars did that well. Noah Gragson did the best, finishing 12th. And instead of bolting out of there as quick as they could after the race, both Tony and Gene stuck around, took pictures, reminisced, had a great time signing things. Heck, Tony Stewart even directed the 14 hauler out of its parking place in the garage area so it could get on its way home back east.
Mm-hmm.
But something went massively south here. Because this is an organization that could, by and large, run itself. Gene Haas didn't have to be hands-on. Tony Stewart didn't need to be hands-on. They had the proper people in the proper place. So why is this team going back to Gene Haas becoming the owner, and it's going to become the Haas factory team? Why did, in other words, Tony Stewart get out of it? We don't know the whole story, but we do know that something went massively south between Tony Stewart and NASCAR.
Probably the direction of some of this charter agreement stuff he didn't like and the direction it was going. So if I had to guess, he probably just said, no, that's it. I'm not going to deal with this.
I don't need the headache. I've got plenty of other things. I've got Tony Stewart Racing, which fields the NHRA competition for that team in Top Fuel and Funny Car. And, of course, Tony Stewart Racing has World of Outlaws and other dirt aspects going on, sprint cars. Plus, he owns Eldora and one other raceway, doesn't he? Paducah, thank you, in Kentucky. He's got plenty on his plate. He knows how to run it. They're all successful. Again, he could have easily just remained kind of the silent partner that put his name on the door. But he chose to get out entirely. And between that and the situation where NASCAR's got problems with 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports, that's showing that there's cracks in the base of NASCAR. Does it mean NASCAR is going to come crumbling down? No. But it does mean that they've got something that they got to fix.
Yep.
It means that NASCAR's got problems. Because if you lose a Tony Stewart and you're willing, seemingly, no disrespect to Bob Jenkins, no disrespect to Denny Hamlin, but if you're willing basically to go Michael Jordan, arguably the most famous person in all of sports at this particular point in time, everybody on the planet knows Michael Jordan's name, and you're willing to just kind of brush him off to the side, you got a problem.
A big one.
And you better fix it.
Quick.
It's too late for Tony Stewart. He's gone. He's walked out the door, and you ain't getting him back. Heck, you even inducted him into the NASCAR Hall of Fame already. He's got no reason to come back. Mm-hmm. He's done. He's washed his hands. He's gone drag racing, and he'll concentrate on all of his other things, and he'll be just fine and happy. Plus, he's got a kid on the way sometime later on this month. Mm-hmm. But Michael Jordan wants to be in this sport. Michael Jordan has invested a lot of money to be in this sport. They just got done with the airspeed. Heck, they're not really 100% done with the airspeed location. They're still finalizing some of the details on that, even though it's open for business. The home base, the new home base of 2311 Racing. He's invested a lot of time. He's invested a lot of money. But he sees there's a problem, just like Tony did. Bob Jenkins sees it as well from Front Row Motorsports. But NASCAR seems to be willing to say, nope, we don't really see the problem that they see. You know, our officiating's fine too. You better take a much more critical look at yourself, NASCAR. You lose a Tony Stewart and you're willing to brush aside a Michael Jordan, you got problems. And you better face them. And you better figure them out. And that leaves us with the sad news. Last Saturday, just before the Xfinity Series race got started, we learned of the passing of a legend. We learned of the passing of the originator of the Alabama gang, the founder, if you will, Bobby Allison. Bobby Allison wasn't born in Alabama. Bobby Allison was born in the late 1930s in Miami, Florida. We talk these days about kids as young as 4, 5 years old getting behind the wheel of some sort of a motorized vehicle, go-kart usually, and they begin their racing career at a very young age. It was a different time when Bobby Allison was coming up through. Got to remember, late 1930s, we're in the Great Depression. There's not a whole lot of money out there. So no, he wasn't racing at 4, 5, 6, 10 years old. In fact, he didn't get into a race car as a driver in earnest competition until he was a senior in high school. Mm-hmm. But he went out there after getting permission from his mom on a misunderstanding. His mom thought he was giving him permission for one race only. Bobby thought, I've got carte blanche. I can race as much as I want. It created problems. But Bobby Allison went out there and proved himself in that first race. And eventually, his mom tried to get him into other stuff. He still found ways to go racing, even after he got shipped off to Wisconsin to go to be under the tutelage of a salesperson that happened to be the brother-in-law of his mom. Turned out that salesperson worked for Mercury Outboard Motors. Mercury Outboard Motors at that time was owned by a guy by the name of Carl Kiekhofer. Look up Kiekhofer Racing. Pretty good resume. It only whetted Bobby Allison's appetite. But he couldn't really find a way to connect with Carl Kiekhofer. Found him very difficult to work for, he said. So he moved back to Miami, tried to go back racing again. And when he got finally the approval of his parents to go ahead and go racing, he realized South Florida wasn't the place to be. So how did they end up in Alabama? Well, he started making calls around the Southeast to find where things were a little more lucrative, where you could make it a little bit more of a living. And he called up Montgomery Motor Speedway in the middle of a week, one week. And they said, yeah, come on up. We'll let you race. What do you got? Okay, put you in this class, blah, blah, blah. Oh, by the way, you might want to know there's a race in a place called Midfield Speedway up in Birmingham. That'll happen the night before so it doesn't conflict. So that way you could do 2 in 1 shot. He comes up, races at Midfield, finishes second. Next night goes down to Montgomery, wins the preliminary race, and finishes top 5 in the feature. Got a grand total of $400. But that was enough to convince him, I need to be here. But not before he went back down to Miami, grabbed his brother, a couple of friends, including a guy that you might have also heard of by the name of Red Farmer. And they all moved to Hueytown. Mm-hmm. He didn't begin the Alabama Gang moniker. That name came from somebody else. Because Bobby, Donnie, Red, they would all go all around the Southeast caravanning, hauling their race cars behind their trucks, going from track to track to track. And they would all leave at the same time, and they would all take off at the same time, and they would all arrive at the next track, all trailing each other, leading the racers in the infield to look up, see the 3 of them coming in, and look at it and go, oh, here comes that Alabama Gang again. The name stuck. And there's only one left. It's Red Farmer. Well, I take that back. Donnie's still alive. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, Donnie's still there.
But Donnie's retired. Red, still racing. Gets in a handful of races every year at Talladega Short Track at the disputed age of somewhere around 97.
No, Red's 93.
93, I'm
93,
sorry.
Yep.
But again, at the disputed age, because he's not really 100% sure, or so he says, of his exact birthday. But he's in his 90s, and he's still racing in a handful of races every year.
Yep.
Bobby Allison, 4th on the all-time list of wins in NASCAR with the Bowman Gray Stadium 1971 win, now officially recognized. He's 4th all by himself with 85 wins. Got himself a title, 1983. Got himself an IROC title in 1980. And just a racer's racer. Just an absolute racer's racer. Mm-hmm. And I've had the pleasure of reading him talk about it, and I've actually had the chance to interview him on more than one occasion. And inevitably, you end up talking about that famed 1979 Daytona 500, where Dale and Donnie and Cale are sitting there battling it out, end up wrecking each other, end up in the infield. Richard Petty goes on to the win. Bobby stops. He's thinking, I'm pretty much going to offer my brother Donnie a ride back to the pits. And he realizes that Donnie and Cale are kind of going at each other. So Bobby comes rushing over. And Bobby consistently, every single time, said it the same way, that Cale went to beating on his face with my fists. That's how he said it every single time.
Every time I've heard it that way, too.
Bobby Allison. God, he's going to be missed, 86 years old. Founding member of the Alabama Gang. He was the guy that got them all together. He was the guy that got Donnie and Red and everybody else to go to Hueytown. Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing that the Allison compound is for sale.
Yep.
For a racing historian or an Allison or Alabama Gang fan, you want to talk about a dream buy.
Yeah, that would be. That would be one in the portfolio you could say that No, I've got something you ain't got.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's the ultimate piece of memorabilia right there. That would be an ultimate piece of memorabilia. Bobby Allison, you'll be missed. Our thoughts and our prayers go out to the entire Allison family.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for joining us this week. We'll talk NHRA, and I guarantee there'll be plenty more to talk about during this weekend's big show. Don't forget about that, 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central Time. Go to CRN Live on YouTube. You can catch it then. And then, of course, we'll be back for edition number 35 of Crossed Flags right here next Wednesday. Hope you join us then.
You've been listening to Crossed Flags, a racing podcast. For more content like this, subscribe to CRN Live on YouTube, and you'll be set to catch the 2-hour live show every Saturday morning at 9 Eastern, 8 Central.
This has been a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.